Morning.
Good morning.
So my name is Aurelie Mangels. I am the Mental Illness Initiative Fellow with MISTIS Death Penalty Due Process Review Project. I work on supporting state coalitions working to introduce and hopefully pass bills to exempt people with severe mental illness from the death penalty. So I think it's great that I'm speaking after Kristen and provides a great introduction, so thank you. My presentation is going to be more focused on polling and legislative action. But first of all, although most of you know what this is about, just a quick reminder of what we are talking about. By serious mental illness, we are talking about disorders like major depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder that result in severe functional impairments. And by exemption, we mean that these people with severe mental illness could still be found guilty, still be sentenced to life without parole, but not sentenced to death or executed. And we are working in death penalty states to pass bills. So first of all, what is the current situation today is that there is actually, in the public opinion, a strong support for the idea of a severe mental illness exemption. And I do want to caveat that with the fact that it's not that easy. And as Kristen showed, there's still like a lot of misunderstandings about what is severe mental illness and that line with evil. So that doesn't mean that we're there yet. However, two national polls in 2014 and 2015 have found a 2-to-1 majority of Americans in favor of the severe mental illness exemption. Relevant professional organizations in the legal and mental health fields also have resolutions since 2006 opposing the death penalty for severely mentally ill, and sometimes conservative voices also step up. In the case of Scott Panetti, more than 30 political conservatives have signed a letter, including former prosecutors and judges, saying that because of his mental illness, Scott Panetti should be spared the death penalty. However, there is no state legislative action. Connecticut is the only state to have ever passed such a bill. They've since abolished the death penalty for future offenses. And no courts have recognized that the execution of people with severe mental illness violates the 8th Amendment. So what happens currently for defendants with severe mental illness in capital cases? Well, their mental illness can be taken into account in capital proceedings, as the example of James Holmes showed. However, they do continue to be sentenced to death and executed. And the most recent case is the one of Adam Ward in Texas, who was executed on March 22nd. The Fifth Circuit opinion, one of the Fifth Circuit opinion in his case started with petitioner has been afflicted with mental illness his entire life. So he is recognized as severe mental illness starting at age 4. However, he was executed. But where we are seeing that the narrative of mental illness is coming in is that many headlines did mention his mental illness without questioning it. Mentally ill Texas man executes mentally ill man. So we are seeing that it's recognized and that it's an issue in the media. So back to the public opinion, I'm going to talk a little bit about research conducted by David Binder Research for the 8th Amendment Project last year in the fall of 2015 about severe mental illness exemption. So this research was, two parts of the research, a polling of 1,200 individuals, 206 states that you can see highlighted here: Idaho, South Dakota, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, and Virginia. And 2 focus groups in Indianapolis in November 2015, men and women, white, independent, conservative, with college education, with the idea of trying to replicate state legislators. And this poll at the first ask found strong support for the exemption of 66% of voters in favor of it. This is just a quick slide about the demographics of the people polled. 46% of them identified as conservative, so we're talking about an audience that's not necessarily abolitionist. This is the proposal that was presented to the voters polled and actually also to the focus group. The proposal changes the death penalty law so that persons with documented evidence of a qualifying severe mental illness present at the time of the crime can't be executed, but can receive a sentence of life in prison without parole if found guilty. When presented just that, 2/3 of voters initially supported. As you can see, 66% evenly divided between strongly and somewhat, 24% opposition, 10% unsure. So after that, the pollers went into more detail about what is the proposal to try and find which parts of the proposal made it more or less likely that voters would support it. And they found that the part that made it more likely to get support was the fact that the proposal requires a case-by-case decision-making process, with 62% of voters more likely to support it after knowing that, and knowing that a judge or jury will consider all the relevant evidence. Other convincing details included the fact that exemption would be only for people who can prove their severe mental illness, and also simply a list of what are the qualifying severe mental illnesses. So after being shown these details, there is a 6 percentage point increase in support. We go to 72% of support. So people were reassured, and the support increased after hearing about what exactly would the proposal entail, and opposition and uncertainty dropped. So after that, the poll is also just tested for which arguments voters found strong in favor of this proposal of severe mental illness, and we were happy to see that 74% of voters simply thought that the fact that severe mental illness creates functional impairments in an individual in their judgment, impulse control, and decision-making skills was a convincing argument in favor of the exemption, which is why we want an exemption, is because severe mental illness creates functional impairment. So we were happy to see that people understood that. Other arguments include the fact that people with mental illness should be treated the same way as intellectually disabled people and juveniles, and also that the process to diagnose would be conducted by experts and would be lengthy and detailed. The focus group findings, so they were shown the same proposal. Of course, it's only 16 people, so it's has to be taken with a grain of salt. However, 13 of the 16 participants thought the legislature should vote yes. This was in Indianapolis, so the Indiana legislature. They agreed serious cases of disorder should qualify, but they also wanted a rigorous case-by-case determination. So we see that there is a strong support, at least in theory, at least when people are polled about severe mental illness exemption. So how do we turn it into action, since we've seen there's no state with such a legislation? Well, this is what we're trying to do here in partnership with some great state coalitions in the 6 states that were polled. First of all, we try and dispel the myth that people with severe mental illness are still being sentenced to death and executed, because some people just tell you, no, that we don't do that anymore. That's no. Well, we say yes. It is happening. The other myth is that it is difficult to malinger severe mental illness in the death penalty case. So we try also to educate the public. What is severe mental illness? What are the functional impairments? Why is it relevant to capital sentencing? And also that we're also not trying to let people back home with society, but life without parole is a real punishment. We also gather behind the mental health community, whose perspective and expertise is absolutely necessary, crucial in this effort. And in Ohio, the campaign that's currently going on, they have a bill in their Senate committee. It was mentioned yesterday by Governor Taft. The coalition is being led by the most leading mental health organizations in Ohio, NAMI Ohio, the Psychiatric Association, Mental Health Ohio, etc. So, and finally, we do create strong processes to address the concerns that I've mentioned in the polling. And we do that when we draft the bills. Thank you.
Meredith and then Seth, yeah.
Hi, Aurelie.